This is the last video in my HBS application series, and I saved this topic for last for a reason. Because if you've watched the rest of the series, what not to do, what HBS is looking for, how to write your resume, who thrives and who struggles, what I change about my own application, and whether or not you're too old for HBS, you might walk away thinking that if you do everything just right, that you'll get in. And that's simply not true. You can do everything perfectly and still get rejected. You can write the best essays of your life, nail the interview, have incredible work experience, a compelling story, and a perfect through line, and still get rejected. So today I want to explain why that is, what rejection actually signals and what it doesn't, what to do if it happens to you, and how to think about whether to reapply or move on. First, let me start with the numbers, because I think most people don't fully internalize how steep the odds are. About 9,000 to 10,000 people apply to HBS each year, and of those, roughly 20%, or around 1,800 to 2,000, receive an interview invitation. And of those who interview, only about 50 to 60% receive an offer of admission. That means roughly 930 people out of nearly 10,000. So sit with that for a second. If you got an interview, you beat 80% of the applicant pool, and you still have a coin's flip of a chance of getting rejected. The interview is not a formality. It is not a victory lap. It is 50-50. And here's the number that I think puts everything into perspective. On the first day of the first day of orientation, at the dean's welcome speech, they told us something that I will never forget. They said, "You all deserve to be here, but you also got lucky. We could have easily filled 3 Clarmans with qualified students." Clarman Hall holds about 1,000 to 1,200 people. So that means HBS believes there are at least 3,000 people in that applicant pool who are qualified to be in the classroom. And they admitted 930. So that means more than 2,000 fully qualified people got rejected. Not because they weren't good enough, not because their essays were bad or their scores were too low, but because there were only 930 seats available and HBS had to make choices. Those choices are about section building, which I've already talked about extensively in this series. HBS is casting a section. They need the right mix of backgrounds, industries, perspectives, geographies, and personalities. And sometimes a fully qualified applicant doesn't get a seat because the section already has someone who fills a similar role. So I want to say this clearly because I think a lot of people hear you got rejected from Harvard and internalize it as a verdict of their worth. It's not. Rejection from HBS means one of a few things, and none of them are you're not good enough. If you didn't get an interview, the most likely explanation is that it was simply too competitive. There are too many applicants with similar profiles, and the admissions committee just couldn't interview everyone. This is especially true if you're coming from a concentrated pipeline. Think consulting, banking, or big tech. There might be over 500 applicants from those fields and only room for 30. The math just doesn't work out for most people, regardless of how qualified they are. It could also mean that your application didn't clearly communicate what makes you unique. Not that you're not unique, but the essays, the resume, or the framing just didn't make it obvious enough in the few minutes that AdCom spent reading your file. That is honestly a fixable problem. Now, if you got an interview and then got rejected, that is a different signal. You had already beat out 80% of the pool. AdCom read your application and thought you were compelling enough to meet in person. The interview rejection likely means one of two things. Either the cultural or personality fit didn't land, maybe you came off differently in person than on paper, or the section puzzle just didn't have a spot for your specific profile this year. One of the alumni I spoke to with after my own interview shared this observation. The people who think they crushed the interview often get rejected, and the people who felt terrible about it often do get in. He said it's not exactly causation, but there is a correlation that he's noticed over the years. And I think the reason is that feeling like you crushed it sometimes means you were performing, such as delivering polished, rehearsed answers. And feeling uncertain sometimes means you are being real, thinking out loud, showing your actual thought process. HBS cares much more about the latter. And if you got into other top programs but not HBS, that actually tells you a lot. If you were admitted to other M7 or top 15 schools, especially with a significant scholarship, that's a signal that you missed HBS by a hair. Those other schools saw your potential, evaluated your profile, and not only admitted you, but decided to invest money in winning you over. Now, I want to talk about something a little bit uncomfortable, because not every rejection is random. Some rejections are definitely earned, and the most common way to earn a rejection from HBS is entitlement. So this is something I've observed since getting here, and I'm sharing it because I think it's genuinely useful to anybody applying or reapplying to HBS. I've heard a lot of stories from classmates about interacting with students from other MBA programs who applied to HBS and did not get in. And some of these interactions are revealing, to say the least. First, these people bring it up unprompted. They'll meet an HBS student and find a way to mention that they applied and rejected. And my question is, why? Why does it matter? And why would you tell me that? Second, and it gets worse, some of them interrogate us about how we got in. They're trying to rationalize why they, with their impressive resume and prestigious background, got rejected, while someone from a no-name school or unconventional career got accepted. They're essentially trying to reverse engineer the admissions decision to prove it was a mistake. And I'll be honest, from the receiving end, it's kind of flattering and validating. It confirms that HBS actually liked me for my personality, my perspective, and my story, not just my credentials. And it also reveals exactly why these people got rejected. Because here's what I believe based on what I've observed. HBS rejects people who feel entitled to be at HBS. If the HBS degree is going to make your head so big it takes up the entire room, HBS knows better than to let you in. If you think your 3 startups and their valuations, which, let's be honest, can be extremely inflated and not reflective of actual impact, entitle you to a seat, you're missing the point entirely. Go watch the dean's speeches. The messages are consistent, humble and impact-driven, not achievement-driven, not ego-driven. HBS is looking for people who will make the section better, not people who think the section should be grateful to have them. And this connects back to something I learned in LEAD first semester. There are 2 types of fit, skill fit and culture fit. A skill gap can be trained and fixed, but a culture mismatch, that is much harder to correct. And if it can't be corrected, it's not worth keeping someone who breaks the culture, no matter how impressive their resume is. HBS would rather admit someone who is a great cultural fit with room to grow in their skills than someone who is technically brilliant but toxic to the community. And I think that's the right call. So if you got rejected, before you go hunting for the real reason, before you interrogate HBS students at conferences, before you try to crack the code, ask yourself honestly, did my application convey humility? Did it show that I care about others, not just my own trajectory? Did my interview reveal someone who listens and builds, or someone who just performs and competes? The admissions committee has been doing this for over 100 years, and they're very good at spotting the difference. Okay, so now let's say you got rejected, you've processed the disappointment, and now you're wondering, should I try again? The answer, as always, is maybe, and it depends. Reapplicants absolutely do get in on the 2nd and even 3rd try. I have classmates who are living proof of that, and they 100% deserve to be here. But how you spend that time between application seasons matters more than the decision to reapply itself. So, what changed for the people who got in on their 2nd or 3rd attempt? From what I've observed, it wasn't a dramatically different resume. It wasn't a new job or a new degree. It was reflection. They took the time to develop a deeper understanding of who they are, what they want, and why HBS specifically. They've refined their personal brand. They've clarified their ambitions. HBS was waiting for them to develop conviction before admitting them into the classroom. And for people who were rejected through the 2+2 deferred admissions program and then got in through regular admissions a few years later, the difference is real career experience and a more grounded outlook. They went from, I think I want to do business, to, I know what I want to do and here's why I need HBS to do it. So what should you do in the gap year? I would recommend reflecting on why HBS and not another school. Don't just reapply again with the same stories and hope for different outcomes. Tailor your application to HBS's core values and language. And if you've watched the series, you already know exactly what those are. Impact, humility, conviction, intellectual generosity, the ability to dream big, and to execute. And then go out there and have some fun. Do some self-discovery, travel, try something new. The worst you can do is lock yourself in a room feeling stressed, spiraling about what went wrong, spamming HBS students and alumni on LinkedIn trying to find the secret formula. If you want to engage with the HBS community, do it genuinely. Attend our conferences. Meet students and alumni because you're genuinely curious about the school, not because you're trying to hack the admissions process. And now let's chat about the rejection timing. Pre-interview versus post-interview rejection. Does the reapply strategy differ? The answer is obviously yes. If you were rejected before getting an interview, the issue is most likely in how your application communicated your uniqueness, assuming all the test scores and GPA were around average. So that means the fixes in the essays, the framing, and possibly the through line. So go back to my video on what HBS is actually looking for and rebuild your narrative around those criteria. Now, if you were rejected after the interview, that means the application itself was strong enough. The issue was the interview room. Maybe the cultural fit didn't come through. Maybe you were performing instead of being yourself. Practice interviewing with people who will give you brutally honest feedback, not people who will tell you what you want to hear. And remember what I said about conviction. HBS wants to see you think out loud, take a position, and be willing to be wrong, not deliver a rehearsed performance. But even if you did all those things, maybe there was just another person with a similar background as you whom the interviewer liked better. And that's not really in your control. So now what about a third attempt? Some people do apply 3 times, and some of them get in. But I would push you to honestly evaluate the opportunity cost. 2 to 3 years of applying, stressing, and orienting your life around one school, is that the best use of that time? Plenty of successful people never got an MBA, and if you have the conviction and the grit, you can do anything. The skills that make someone successful, the ability to think clearly, build relationships, solve hard problems, and persist through failure, those aren't taught exclusively at HBS. They're taught by life. And I think the real reason a lot of people pursue an MBA, especially an MBA from HBS, is to find conviction, to gain more certainty that their career plan will work. And HBS does kind of provide that. It de-risks your career. It gives you a network, a credential, and a set of frameworks that will make you more confident in your decisions. But the de-risk isn't free. It costs $250,000 in 2 years of your life. And if the only reason you want it is because you think the Harvard name will make you somebody, that is the wrong reason. That's a prestige obsession, not a career strategy. So if you got rejected, I want you to sit with this question. Who are you without HBS? If the answer is, I don't know, then that's the real problem, not the rejection. The rejection is just a data point. The real problem is that you've tied your identity to one school's decision, and that's a fragile foundation for a career, self-image, and a life. The people I admire most at HBS and outside of it are the ones who know exactly who they are regardless of what institution is on their resume. They have conviction. They have a point of view. They know what impact they want to make, and they're going to make it whether Harvard says yes or not. And if you're that person, rejection from HBS is a detour, not a dead end. Now, a quick but important section. If HBS said no, it does not mean every school will too. Different schools evaluate differently. Different schools value different things. And I've talked about this through the series. So the version of you that didn't fit HBS's section puzzle might be exactly what another school is looking for. And don't discount schools outside the M7. There are excellent programs, some of them local and some of them part-time, where the ROI might actually be better for your specific situation, especially if you're factoring in cost, geography, family, and career goals. The best MBA program is the one that best fits your life, and that's not always HBS. Now, before I close, one more practical insight. If you got rejected from HBS but were admitted to other M7 or T15 schools, especially with a significant scholarship, take that as a strong signal that you were very close to getting into HBS. And here's why. MBA programs track KPIs. KPI stands for Key Performance Indicators, such as the average GMAT scores, post-graduation salaries, and employment rates. When a school offers you a big scholarship, they're betting that you will raise their metrics. They think you're going to be successful, and they're investing money to compete for you against schools like HBS. So if multiple strong programs admitted you and offered you money, that means the market has validated your profile. HBS just made a different casting decision for their specific section. That is honestly useful information if you're deciding whether to reapply, because it means the gap between you and admission is probably small and fixable. On the other hand, if you applied broadly and didn't get into any top programs, that signal is different. The issue might be more fundamental. Maybe the profile needs more development, the stories need more reflection, or the timing isn't quite right. That doesn't mean give up forever. That means the gap is wider and requires more time and more work. Either way, the signal tells you what to do next, so listen to it. Now I want to end by reminding you what the dean said on our first day. He told us, a room of 950-ish people, that every one of us, anxious, most of us dealing with imposter syndrome, all of us wondering if we'd been admitted by mistake, that we all deserve to be here. But we also got lucky. They could have filled 3 Klarmans with qualified students. 3 Klarmans! So that means more than 2,000 fully qualified people got rejected. So if you're one of those people, I want you to hear this. You were qualified. The math just didn't work out in your favor this time. That doesn't mean you're not talented. It doesn't mean your story isn't compelling. It does not mean you can't build an incredible career. It just means that there were 930 seats and thousands of people who deserved one. So if you got rejected, grieve it, learn from it, and then go build something. Whether you reapply next year, choose a different school, or skip the MBA entirely, the thing that makes you valuable was never the acceptance letter. So this wraps up the HBS application series. If you made it through all these videos, thank you. I really hope something in this series helped you think more clearly about your application, your career, or yourself. And if you want to keep following my HBS journey, recruiting, classes, travel, cooking, and of course, Blue and Bell, subscribe and stick around. There's a lot more to come. Until next time, bye guys!